Good evening and welcome along to NUFC Matters with me, Steve Wraith, Steve Hastie and Mitch, the three amigos. Good evening, lads. How are you?
Very well.
Evening. Doing all right, all things considered.
Yeah, well, that's it. Good to see you. Good to see you guys, and great to be back on a Friday night. Another 90-minute show tonight. Unfortunately, Dunstan have chosen to play once again on a Friday night at home, so I've got to cut the show slightly short to go along and see the lads play Morpeth. So looking forward to that again. Just a little bit about last week's game. I mean, tight game against Blythe Spartans. Got beat 2-1, but they're putting themselves in against teams in higher divisions, and just a lot to enjoy about the whole process of going back to a football match. And I think that's why I think it'd be good to start with the potential, Steve, of getting back to the game at St James's Park. And I know you've had an email which you shared with me and with Neil over the last few days from Newcastle United about potential, the potential, return to St James's Park for fans. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, that's right. That's the first communication I think we've had as supporters or as a supporters group from the club, probably since, certainly since the lockdown. And proposing to hold a Zoom meeting with members who were on the previous fans forum and people who have continued with some of the focus groups next Tuesday to talk about plans that I presume they've got in place or they're proposing to put in place and asking advice on and guidance on or thoughts about on how we should be returned to St James's Park. No idea of what numbers they're talking about, no idea what the structure is going to be, no idea on what their initial thoughts are. There's been nothing put out in the way of an agenda. But what it does show is that there are plans afoot, there are moves afoot, rather, put it that way, to consider sometime in October, supporters being welcomed back into St James's Park in some shape or form. So I think that the most important thing from Newcastle fans between now and Tuesday is to perhaps let us, as supporters, as the three of us, either through DMs and private messages or through some of the fan groups that are out there, to give us their thoughts. I know we did put something out on NUFC Fans United about it. Got some strange comments. Some people said that it's the perfect time to boycott. We've had a lot of people saying they're never going back. We've had people saying that they think it should be only season ticket holders that are on the 10-year plan. The problem is we've got no idea what sort of numbers they're talking about. I mean, bearing in mind the ground holds 52,000, and you could probably scatter, at least a third into the ground, probably more than that, and still have social distancing in some way, shape, or form. That's on the terrace or in the seat. The question is what their plans are outside of that, in the concourses and in various other areas of the ground and the toilets, etc. So it's going to be an interesting Tuesday night, and then following on.
I mean, from my perspective, do I have like super fans? We have a lot of people who go to away games, Steve. I would imagine that the numbers are in the hundreds as opposed to thousands. Obviously, people who go to every away game, you're talking possibly 250, 300. I think if I remember rightly, back in the day was like the elite who never missed a game. You're talking about, sadly, people like the Undertaker, who used to go to every single game, never missed it, never missed a match, never missed a ticket. You're talking about Biffa from NUFC.com, who more or less goes to every single game. So those people you would imagine they'd be a shoe-in, wouldn't you?
Well, I mean, that's it. I mean, we don't know whether there's going to be a ballot. We don't know whether there are loyalty points to take into consideration. Now, obviously, there's no such thing as a loyalty point at home. There is loyalty points for people who travel away. There hasn't been any discussion on, or not that I'm aware of, on travelling to games, away games. I don't know how it's going to impact fans who live a fair distance from St James's Park, whether they're classed as home fans or whether they've got some sort of criteria that the government's going to lay down on that in terms of travelling up to football games. I mean, there's a lot of questions that are certainly going to be raised by the idea of coming back to football grounds. It's not as simple as just saying, right, well, every season ticket holder, bearing in mind there's 36,000. it will be in with a chance. There will be some who perhaps don't want to go back because of health reasons. You know, they might have underlying conditions. There's the other question of how do you handle families? What about family groups? What about people who travel, you know, with their kids? You know, maybe there's a family group. I go with George, Neil's dad. You know, will we be able to sit together? Will there be some embargo on George because of his age? Perhaps, I don't know. Will George want to go? That's another question. But he has to be given the option. People like George have to be given the option if they're season ticket holders of coming to St James's Park and watching a game. So there's a lot of questions that I think are going to be raised by this, and I'm really, really interested. Not just in I can understand the salty comments or the flippancy of well, I'm never going back. It's been rubbish anyway. It's a perfect time, boy. I understand all that, but the question is, it's happening. So yeah. That's why we need to talk about it. We can't just forget about it. It needs to be talked about, and everybody needs to have an input into this who wants to go. It can't be some sort of decision behind closed doors, although I'm making an assumption that there's decisions have been made and they were going to be presented with someone and saying, choose X, Y, or Z, you know? Because this is, first week in October that we're talking about? Now, obviously, all of that could go out the window, couldn't it? If, for example, as has happened in Leeds today, they're talking about a lockdown of the city because of a rise in COVID. I know that there's been rises in the Gateshead area, etc., etc. Leicester, they're talking about another lockdown there. I mean, there's 2 Premier League clubs straight away that could have problems, and their plans could go out the window. So let's see where it takes us. But it'd be interesting to see what sort of questions, if people come up with suggestions tonight, you know, that would be. There's
one on the screen, Steve, which you should take in. Marty Lawrence, ask for volunteers to defer. I'm an OAP with underlying conditions. I would happily defer for a while if it meant I kept my ticket long term. So
yeah, I think that's the key, Steve. That's a big key, isn't it? You know, it's all well and good if you're a season ticket holder, but people will be worried that they're going to lose the opportunity to come back when everything's clear. They want to keep their seat, they want to keep their ticket, and they want that guarantee that when it's all over, we'll go back to what was the norm, if you like, with the same people in the same area. And I think that's a very, very important point that has been raised there. Very important indeed, and certainly something I'll mention.
Yeah, Mitch, I mean, it's, it's not really the first thing on a lot of people's agenda at this moment in time. Obviously, COVID is still quite prevalent in the news headlines, and people still getting infected. No vaccine on the horizon over here. And of course, lockdown, happening in certain areas. And, it's definitely the last thing on a lot of people's minds, but some people will just want to get back to the normality of being able to go to St James's Park. How do you pick people? Somebody suggested earlier there, I think it was Tom Lynn, just suggesting that we essentially do it on a rota basis on season ticket holders, which would seem like the obvious thing to do. But where do you start?
It's really difficult because we don't know what numbers we're talking about first. That's the first thing we need to have an idea of is what the numbers are at. Like I think I probably mentioned a couple of times over the last few weeks. One of my contacts who's closely connected to Stevenage said that they were told they were going to get 5% of their support back in. That's 400 people. Now that's obviously, I suspect they're doing it club by club based on facilities, etc., and how you can distance people. So that's the first thing you need to know is how many. And then we've almost got this hierarchical thing amongst the fan base, and I get it and I understand it. I think my attitude on it's changed over the last few years since becoming more expat, and being distanced from it a little bit. And particularly, it's interesting. We had this chat last night. We were talking with a Liverpool fan and Everton fan. There was a Chelsea fan there and a few Geordies together, and we were talking about the Liverpool supporters club here in Dubai, because the Everton lad was getting quite wound up because some of them had asked him, but you're from Liverpool, why don't you support Liverpool? And some of these lads didn't have a clue that Everton were even in the same city as Liverpool, which is, but on the other side of that, the Liverpool fans just accept that. and they're quite accepting, and they understand it. And yes, they've had global fan base bigger than many for years. They've certainly had a presence in this region for years, and so the expat scousers tend to not judge fans being a better fan or a worse fan, because that's something that I feel happens with our fan base sometimes.
Yeah,
and that's for me, part of the essence of some of the divisions that Mike Ashley's used to prise those cracks open over time, and why the fan base that we have sometimes gets quite agitated with itself over things that really we shouldn't. We should just let go. And this is going to be another one of those sticking points if they don't handle it right. So I think fair play to Lee Marshall for reaching out to everybody and saying, right, we need to have some input about how we're going to work this out. You know, Lee gets a lot of stick, but he does an impossible job, and he's also very often hamstrung by the people above him. You know, he's in a very tricky place. And so I think I for one, would reiterate with Steve, you know, reach out to us. And if we can feed things in, if you've got ideas, and if you've Colin's quite right, it is a minefield, because you can't keep everybody happy, and you won't keep everybody happy. You're going to upset some people. It's a no-win situation in some respects. But I think there's got to be some sort of process whereby we can work these things out. Because the passions that we have do overrun sometimes. And it's not as easy for me to step away from it, because I am geographically distant. And so, you know, is this fan better than that fan? I think we tried to say this when we were doing the Trust Road shows and the NUFC Road shows. You know, we were setting something up that was for anybody who'd been in every game, 100 games, 10 games, or no games. You can still be a supporter of the club if that's what you do it, and you do it in your own way. And I think we've lost sight a little bit of some of that, personally. And I think it's good that we're going to try and find a way to work this out to get some return to normality, because the game is not the same. The fans' absence has been very much noticeable. It ain't the same, and it's very, very difficult. And it must be difficult for the players to respond the same way without a fan base there and a crowd there. But equally, then you see some of the things that they're saying is about, you know, you can come to the ground, but no chanting, no singing. What? You know, it's like asking a tiger to not bite your hand off. That's really very difficult. So I'll be interested to see how some of the ideas that come up, because I think we do have to try and find a way to help each other on this.
Yeah, no, I'd agree, lads. I'd agree. You know, great to see, as I say, potentially supporters coming back into the ground. But as Steve said right at the start of the programme, if anybody's got any ideas, anyone's got any suggestions, please ping them through. We'll stick them on the screen. Steve can see them, and he can take them away to the online meeting this week. And hopefully there's some kind of fair resolve to something which obviously could easily split the supporters down the middle. Plenty to talk about, as always. We'll try and get through as many people's questions as possible. I see a lot of people commenting already on the arrival of Ryan Fraser, obviously in Newcastle now, to have talks with Steve Bruce. So let's talk a little bit about football, Steve. And yeah, I mean, it's not been a great week for the football team. You know, an embarrassing defeat, although they've toned it down and said it was just a practice game. Had the won 5-1, would have been quite as eager to call it a practice game, I'm not so sure, but a rather embarrassing defeat against Middlesbrough 5-1. The captain, Lascelles, obviously being dismissed from the field of play with one of Borough's players. And then subsequently, we've had a lot of injuries. We had injuries anyway. We had a striker in Joe Linton who was missing in action without any comment from the club whatsoever as to where he was and what he was doing. He's now arrived back. But we've now got further injuries, which are, you know, already adding to a dilapidated squad with, you know, the season fast approaching. So, yeah, it's never dull at Newcastle, Steve.
It's certainly not, is it? I mean, we thought we were in the first leg of two, didn't we? And then they cancelled the game. They were supposed to play Borough on Monday, and it's been cancelled, hasn't it? We're playing Stoke tomorrow. 1 o'clock kickoff, apparently. Not that anybody's going to be there. But, yeah, I mean, for me, the Dubravka one started it. You know, when I heard that Dubravka was injured, I thought, oh, that's not good. He's been hurt in training, or he's gone overseas and he's tweaked an ankle or something like that. It then transpires that he came back, reported to the club that he had an injury, and then they sent him out training for 2 or 3 days, which, you know, when somebody comes back and says they're injured, you would normally think, well, the first port of call is going to be the physio room and the fitness table, and somebody's going to look at it and go, great, you know, do we need you pushing yourself in the first 3 days back? Do I need you running up those sand dunes and up those hills and, you know, run through Castle Farm or whatever they do these days? I don't know. They used to run around, I think, Neil's estate and you know, and go all over the place. But, you know, we suddenly find that he's been pushed, and then there's been like a breakdown. Now, I remember being at the training ground when Rafa was doing training sessions, and Lascelles didn't turn up. And we said one of the first questions that Bill asked was, "Oh, where's Lascelles?" And he went, came in this morning, said he had a little tweak, so Lascelles is in with the physios. Dummett's out here, but he will only be out for 20 minutes because that's all I want him to do, and then he's going to be going back in because I don't want them doing those the 2 next sessions that we do, because they don't suit the way that we're planning on running those sessions, won't suit the injury that he's been carrying. There's also no sign of so-and-so else because he's I think it was Gale. You'll not see Gale today because, again, the injury that Gale's had, I think I'd rather keep him to one side. Whereas it would appear with Bruce, it's like, yeah, it's like being at school, isn't it? You know, you turn up at 9:05 with your plimsolls and you're sent out running, you know, and running, you know, 3 outers, 4 inners, and then you get back and you know, that type of thing. You know, it seems very unprofessional. And then to hear that you're getting injuries so quickly, you know, yes, you'd normally hear of players coming back, and I know that they haven't had much of a layoff. But and you can understand little tweaks and stuff like that. But to me, the whole question of how the club operates just beggars belief at times. You talk about Fraser. You mentioned there that Fraser's come and he's talking to Steve Bruce. I did put on Twitter, well, the only thing Steve Bruce could approve would be that he's allowed to get some sort of family rail card to allow him to travel up with LNER up to Aberdeen during the week with the family. Because apart from that, you know, Bruce will have nothing to do with any transfer discussion, you know, terms and conditions. It's not the old days where, you know, Joe Harvey would nip down to Lehman Bar or somewhere like that and meet them in a pub or at a hotel and at Scotch Corner and say, right, this is what your terms are, lads. You know, this is what you're coming for, right? Get yourself home, and there's the money for the train for tomorrow when you've told the wife that you're transferred, that type of thing. Oh, I mean, it doesn't work like that anymore. It works through agents. It works through the directors. It works through Charnley and only Charnley, and perhaps with a bit of input from Steve Nixon, you know, who will be saying, right, well, if he doesn't agree with that, then we'll go to number 2 on the list, or in Newcastle's case, number 22 on the list, you know, because that's the way it operates, isn't it? You know, it's just crazy. I mean, yeah, I can't remember. There's been so many. How many players have been linked with just this week? You know. Yeah. And I know we always get linked with somebody, but it just seems to be getting linked with, like, you know, names that you've never heard of, people that you've never heard of, that all of a sudden somebody tells you is absolutely brilliant and outstanding and had a great time since January when their particular league in Kazakhstan came back or something like that, you know.
Look great on YouTube, basically. Yeah, Bizwidget says, what do we think? What do we think about Sassuolo Rogerio? Well, to be honest, I don't know anything about him. That's what I think.
Either.
I went there on holiday once, and God knows where it was, but I'm sure I went there.
Yeah. George says the Bruce hatred is getting boring now, lads. I don't hate Steve Bruce at all. I just, you've got to be honest. We're trying not to be too critical, and the ball hasn't been kicked yet this season. And I think if you go back through the episodes of the three Amigos, certainly we're being more than fair to Steve Bruce, and we've, certainly eaten humble pie. I think is what I've done in plentiful amounts by saying, essentially it's, a job well done by him last year under difficult circumstances. What happens next season, of course, is a new season. But I don't think we've been too critical of Steve Bruce on here.
I think we've given him a fair crack of the whip. We've always said he took a job that was an unenviable job to take. However, I think we've got to be fair to criticise where it's due. We're certainly not cheerleaders for anybody. I mean, there's certain journalists who are very much Steve Bruce cheerleaders. We're talking about injuries, and if you look at his injury record with his squads through his whole career, the data's there, the facts are there. It comes up time and time again that he is constantly using the phrase, "Well, we've been unlucky with injuries so far this season." He's done it at Sunderland, he's done it at Villa, he's done it at Birmingham. That was just the three I saw. So, it's worrying. And the other thing that worries me is it's patently obvious when you're a striker and a left back, and we're just over a week away from the start of the season, and we've addressed neither.
Yeah.
If Fraser Sainz is a good player, from my point of view, he's better than some of what we've got. So you're always looking to improve the squad. It's not that long ago that I think Arsenal were talking about paying 20 million for the lad, So he's obviously got something. But that would be two midfielders and a teenage keeper. Yeah. And we're crying out for a left back and a striker. Yeah. And that has not been addressed. That said, we've had so much disruption to the close season because of everything else going on in and around the club. Where do we go from here? And this is the problem. Quite right, Richard. Shambles, top to bottom.
Yeah. Shambles. No, it is a shambles top to bottom, and I think until a lot of people asking us about the T word, is the takeover still on, and have you spoken to Amanda? Same questions that I get, more or less every night of the week on this show. And I've said to everybody, takeover, as far as I'm concerned, is still very, very active, and we will hear something one way or another in due course, and it won't be too much longer. I think we might hear something before the start of the season. I might be wrong, but if I am wrong, it'll not be the first time. So let's wait and see what happens on that. Yeah, there's no reason to give false confidence, and that's certainly not what we'd want to do. But it's not over till it's over. Put it that way. Steve,
can I add something to that, Steve? Yeah.
Go for it.
One thing I would say from my experience of dealing with people over here who've been connected to everything that's going on, their passion for the club and their straightforwardness shines through in everything that they do. And everybody's stamping their feet and crying for a statement now. There's a myriad reasons why they may not be able to give a statement. Many of them are probably legal. And I'm quite sure one way or another, a statement will be made that will address absolutely everything that fans are wanting addressed. And so just be that little bit more patient, and let's see what comes of it all. That's, again, like you, not to sit here and be accused of giving false hope and things like that. But people shouldn't be getting distressed about the fact that there's silence, because it is golden for me at the minute. That's my personal take on it.
Yep, no, I agree. Steve, we're just talking there a little bit about, people potentially doing the opposite, with Steve Bruce, and praising him to the hilt when at times he has made a bit of a mess of things. You were watching Sky Sports transfer talk today, weren't you? And you wanted to bring up a point about that, and it does involve journalists, I suppose, in what you're about to say.
Yeah, I mean, they come up with all sorts of facts and figures, don't they? They rattle off all sorts of crazy things. I watched an argument just earlier about Lionel Messi, and somebody backtracking on what he said just a few days ago about Lionel Messi, and about how he was, destined, where he was destined for, and how it was all going to gonna phase out. And I found that sort of really interesting. But it's this cheerleader business. It's certain reporters out there who seem to be wanting a cheerleader, Bruce, but also want to tell us as supporters that we should be getting behind them. Well, it's not the reporters that pay to go into St James's Park. It's not the reporters who stand there, for 90 or sit there for 90 minutes or cheer the team on. It's us. We are the supporters, but they're telling us that what we should be doing and what we should be saying and what we should be putting up with, And I find that kind of, it sticks in my throat. It's quite galling to hear that sort of comment from them, Yeah, Neil.
Steve, we've had this all the time. We've talked about this again here a few times. The same people that were telling us we should be grateful for Mike Ashley and shut up and thank him for what he was doing, then suddenly were telling us to stand up and rise up and one because of human rights issues and TV piracy and things that are absolutely nothing to do with us. Yeah. Absolutely nothing to do with us. And yet they keep telling them what to do. And then they're the same people who tell us we're deluded when all we actually want to do is see our team compete for something and show some passion and pride and feel invested and cared for. Yeah. And they're the same ones who talk about 30 years of hurt for Liverpool when they've won more trophies. They've been in 2 competitions we've never been in, and yet they tell us we're deluded. It's the same people that go on and on and on. They've got this preset conception about what Newcastle United fans are and aren't and do and don't want, and they put words in my mouth constantly. They don't represent me. They don't allow it to be represented.
That's right. They tried to set an agenda. I mean, this one particular piece this morning, they were talking about in the transfer window, who's the best right back out there that the likes of Manchester United or Liverpool or Arsenal or Chelsea could go for? Who's the best? Who do you think? So the reporter asks the question to his 2 Sky News reporter colleagues sitting alongside him. And one of them, in all seriousness, it wasn't said as a joke. It wasn't said in a flippant or a manner in any way, shape, or form. But he turned around and he said, "Well, for me, the best right back in the world in world football at the moment is Lucy Bronze." And I'm like, what? I mean, it's a totally different game for a start. It's women's football as opposed to men's football, right? So. But he's coming out with that, and you're thinking, what made you say that? For a start, Lucy Bronze couldn't play in the Premier League. It's just not possible, Secondly, we're talking about men's professional football, not women's professional. She is probably the best right back in women's football. She's just won the Champions League for the 3rd time, I think, with either the 2nd or 3rd club that she's played at. And she's now available and possibly turning up at Chelsea or Man City or somewhere like that. Great, brilliant. That's brilliant for her. But for a Sky reporter on a programme talking about the transfer window and about Arsenal, Chelsea, Man United, Tottenham, the top 6, because that's all they talk about. And they might throw Villa into the mix because they're making bids on people that we are supposed to be interested in, in the shape of Wilson and people like that. But you're thinking, take it seriously, lads. How are you, man? Take it seriously. Was it a wind-up? Did I miss something? Did I miss something there? Because I was completely bamboozled by it, I'm still mopping the coffee up off the floor, to be quite honest. It was just ridiculous, and that's the quality of reporting and the quality of Sky and that transfer window program, or the transfer centre as they call it, that they're now going to be on every day at 10 o'clock and at 7 o'clock at night for the next 31 days. If that's not enough to make you switch Sky off or dump your Sky subscription and go to some IPTV through your dongle or whatever it might happen to be called, or whatever you've got in terms of a little box, then bring it on. That's the way it's going to have to be, because you cannot put up with rubbish like that anymore, quite frankly.
No, Mitch, I want to ask you about the Chinese television deal. We've said for the last few weeks there seems to be a hell of a lot going on in the background, but also a hell of a lot going on in plain sight. We've seen FIFA come out and say that a state owning a football club wouldn't be an issue. We've seen piracy deals being sorted out here, there, and everywhere. Now we've seen the termination of the Premier League TV deal in China. Is this just another part of this? Is it just a coincidence? Is there a power play going on? And Newcastle's takeover is going to benefit from this kind of thing.
It certainly could, in my opinion. It shows the Premier League are not perhaps in as strong a position as they believed they were.
UEFA, not FIFA. Thanks, Chris. Thanks.
I think with the termination of the deal, Steve and I talked about something earlier today where, magically they're in talks with Man United's YouTube partner about possibly providing some sort of service with them. That's magic, isn't it? How that connection comes up. Isn't that strange? But equally, things like, for example, if there's a hiatus and there isn't any football available, are you going to see an increase in illegal streaming in China? And what are the Premier League going to do about it? And what are they going to do about teams which have money coming into them from China? Now they've made such a big deal over piracy. And I think the other thing that could make it interesting is, if I'm right, people can correct this here. I think beIN Sports have some of the regions for places like Thailand and Malaysia nearby to China, or we're going to suddenly start seeing their feeds nicked and taken into China, and are they going to make as much a fuss about it? There's an absolute. The more we talk about it, and the more we get sent stuff, and the more we dig into things, you suddenly realise you've gone from playing noughts and crosses to 3D chess, and you haven't got a half a clue what the blinking rules are. And the more that comes out, like, oh, this company's going to take over the rights potentially, and you see the links to Man United, and you're like, hang on, are you just carving this all up for yourselves? Is there a bit of a cartel feel going on here? Because I want to try and not get dragged into conspiracy theories and things like that. But then the more that comes out and the more you see, it's hard not to. And I get why some fans go right off the deep end about it. Because it's I'm not a believer in coincidence.
Mm. Yeah. What do you think, Steve? I mean, it's interesting to see these things happening, and I personally feel it's all linked in some way, and I think it'll only benefit a potential takeover at Newcastle. I think it'll give Masters that little bit of wriggle room that he needs to be able to come back to the table and say, well, actually, we've found a way that we can do this, and I personally feel that that's what will eventually see this deal go through at some time.
I think you're right, Steve. I think that's quite a possibility. What's interesting with the Chinese TV situation is that Suning, who owned the rights to the Chinese PPTV, or whatever they call it, IPTV, that they broadcast it through, they've refused to pay the money that they felt as though that they didn't need to pay, because of the time of lockdown from March until the games that the season that's just finished. And they decided they weren't going to pay. I think it came to something like £160 million. They'd already paid £200 million for those rights. They decided not to pay £160 million, and I think the total deal is something like £550 or £560 million. That basically the Premier League just said, "Well, get lost. We're not interested." But I think that politically, that particular company wanting to save £160 million in the bigger scheme of things, that's a drop in the ocean, because that company actually, or the holding company that owned them, came out and said that they had a startling year, and their profits had rocketed and hadn't been affected by COVID whatsoever. In fact, they were now, falling over the cash bags that were stacked up around their feet. So if that's not political pressure that's been put into play, given the comments that were made about China and about issues in Hong Kong, then I don't know what is. What's also interesting is there's 3 clubs in the Premier League now owned by Chinese companies. One of them has only just come up into the Premier League. West Brom, they're spending money. They've bought another. They've bought player today. They're spending like 18 million, 20 million. Southampton, a club that a deal took quite a long time to go through, but are now owned 80% by a Chinese company. The particular owner of that company has them up for sale. He wants out. All the word coming out of Southampton is he wants out. Does he want out, or is he being told to get out? The third one's Wolverhampton Wanderers, and surprisingly, Wolverhampton Wanderers are the only club that hasn't spent any money this season in the transfer market. Hasn't brought anyone in at all. So again, is that external pressures being brought to play at Wolverhampton? Chinese owned, Fosun, big company, plenty money, but nothing, no movement there. It's going to be interesting because I do honestly think that and I had this discussion on Twitter the other day, when a Chinese state tells the company to jump, they don't even ask how high they've got to jump. They just jump and jump and jump because that's where the pressure comes from. They know if their government is telling them to do something, they do it. And we might not hear that they're being forced to pull out the Premier League or to give issues or cause issues for the Premier League, because remember, it's only a couple of weeks ago that they dropped a couple of games. Arsenal's games were dropped in China from a live stream because something that Mesut Ozil had said about the treatment of the Uyghur people. NBA, they've been pulled completely because of what Trump has been doing and saying, and they literally just pulled the plug one day and said that's it. And it's very, very popular basketball, very popular in China, and watching it, and the government just went switch the feed off, and it's gone just like that. And it sounds to me like they're doing exactly the same with the Premier League. And it's not the TV companies doing it. It's the state. It's the government. It's the government putting pressure on other countries and other states, like America, like the UK, because they've fallen out politically over something. In our case, it's Hong Kong. In the Premier League's case, it could well be because of Ozil and the way that he mouthed off about the Uyghur treatment of the Uyghur people. And in America, it's the NBA and something that happened with Trump and embargoes. So politics has a big part to play, a massive big part to play. Let's see if we'll get in the next 31 days if suddenly Wolves do go on a massive spending spree, and Southampton go on a big spending spree, and Wolves and West Brom continue with their spending spree, or let's see whether all of a sudden those clubs are up for sale soon.
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting couple of weeks. That's for certain. And I mean, let's get back to the football. The season's rapidly approaching, Mitch, and let's look at that Middlesbrough game in particular. 5-1 defeat is never good. At the best of times, but to a local rival who is currently plying its trade in a lower division, it borders on embarrassing. The captain getting sent off, does that tell you that there's maybe a little bit of disharmony amongst the players, that the uncertainty maybe of the takeover is getting to them, or that maybe that now that they're settling in under Steve Bruce, they're realizing that things aren't as great as they all expected them to be? When he took over last year, is there something wrong? Do you think maybe in the team squad at the moment?
Could be all of the above and none of the above. I mean, this is the problem. We don't get anything out of the club anymore, and so there's part of me when I saw that result and looked at the reports on it, think, oh, is this a Leyton Orient moment? Because it could be used like that. I just don't know whether that has happened. It doesn't feel like it has. We all knew after that Leyton Orient game quite clearly something had gone on in the dressing room afterwards, and that there was harsh words said and tempers flying and almost to the point of fists flying. And we've had none of that about this. Lascelles getting sent off as team captain is a strange one. because usually he's the leadership influence there. That's what everybody sees and feels from the dressing room. I try not to read too much into it, and I really don't try and read too much into pre-season friendlies, particularly in this situation that we're in. Short pre-season, COVID affected. I think this is the reason why the NFL, interestingly, cancelled all their pre-season. They're just going straight into the season. They're doing training camps. They made slight alterations to just how the squads and rosters work. So they've got people who can come in if say they're hit by COVID or if they're hit by more injuries because they haven't had a pre-season. But they've just decided no pre-season. We're just going straight into the season. Done. Whether it was a case of some of our lot not wanting to get injured because they know how many injuries they're carrying.
Yeah.
But if you go into a game with that attitude, I certainly think one of the worst injuries I ever saw on a football pitch was somebody who dangled his leg into a tackle because he didn't really want to, and then all of a sudden his foot's pointing in the wrong direction. And that's how some of those injuries happen. And so it's really difficult to read too much into it, and I try not to, but it's certainly not a good look.
No, it's definitely not, is it, Steve? I mean, the main thing is with friendlies, they're there to blow the cobwebs out. And as Alan Miller says, Mitch has quite rightly pointed out the Leyton Orient game was a big turning point in that promotion season. Alan Miller says there's no Kevin Nolan or Joey Barton in the dressing room this time. Is there a big enough character in that dressing room? Matt Ritchie, for one, is me. For me, is one. I definitely feel he is. Somebody who cares about the club, wants to see it do well. Certainly, the club are trying to push him out again as part of the make weight for Callum Wilson. But my understanding is Ritchie doesn't want to go. He's just signed a new contract. He's happy at Newcastle. But yeah, it's difficult. It's difficult times at the minute, isn't it? With the injuries and no goals in the team.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know what, Alan took the words out of my mouth, because I was going to say no Kevin Nolan, no Joey Barton, no Steve Harper. Those were the three that sort of led the rebellion and or stood up and told the rest of them where to go, and people cleared out. Looking at the game, the Middlesbrough game, I think what scared me the most was we were playing Neil Warnock's team. I thought, Christ, we've just had 5 knock past by a team managed by Neil Warnock. And if you look at Borough's results, I think Borough had one game where they scored 5 goals. They've had 2 games since something like 2018 where they've scored 5 goals. One, I think, was against Hartlepool in a pre-season friendly. And then I think they had another one last season in a pre-season friendly where they scored 5, and didn't concede any. Obviously, that wasn't with Warnock as manager. But apart from that, all last season, Borough scraped like either 1-0 wins, 2-1 wins, or 1-0 defeats. 2-0.
Steve, they were going down until Warnock came in.
Oh yeah.
If you look at their form, they were dropping like a stone. They'd have been playing the Mackhams next season if they'd stuck with Woodgate.
That's right.
And you're right. That's the thing that threw us.
Yeah. It was only other clubs, really, the results of other clubs going the way they did, that basically saved them with a game to go, because their form themselves was so poor. That
and Wigan. Yeah,
absolutely. And the Wigan situation. But that for me was scary, It's just, but then even when the team was announced and people were saying, actually, we've put out a decent team there, that looks like a strong lineup, and before you know it, it was Skittles time, I mean, we only saw, I don't know about you two guys, I only saw the goals from a handheld camcorder from behind the goal, so even then, I think there was one of them where you actually saw it from the other end where somebody broke through, and then I couldn't decide whether it was Lejeune or Lascelles that fell over. And then when I saw the half-hearted tackle that went in to try and stop the lad as he was heading into the box, I realised it was Lejeune that had fallen, and it was Lascelles that was making the half-handed tackle and the turnaround. It was the turnaround and the pointing and the arms up and the questioning that told us it was Lascelles at the end. But after that, the goals, it was just like a free-for-all. It was just, if you had seen goals like that at Dunstan, Steve, last Friday, or if you see goals like that tonight at Dunstan, you'll be at home.
Yeah.
And you'll still be hearing the manager shouting at them while you're back in your living room, quite frankly.
Yeah.
Because it was shocking, I mean, and yes, we scored one goal, but for me, it's just you're a professional club, you're a Premier League club, you shouldn't be getting beat. I mean, if it had been a 2-2 draw or a 3-3 draw and it was a competitive game and, honours evening or something like that, I could accept that. If we got beat by 1, but they actually get hammered by 5. And then nothing from the club, no sort of, nothing from the manager that says that was absolutely shocking and that's never going to happen again. And don't worry, lads, when you do get back into the ground, I'm not going to be putting up with performances like that either. Nothing at all. Just washed over and forgotten about, and nothing from anyone in the press either. No castigating from anyone in the press. None of the local press guys having a go. None of the broadsheet national guys having a go. It's just silence. Newcastle not bothered.
As we know, Steve Bruce has got form for losing derby matches 5-1. I was at one of the greatest ones, of course, when Halloween Newcastle beat Steve Bruce's Sunderland 5-1. So we shouldn't have been too surprised. Josh Blakey, he asks an interesting question, which will certainly get us three talking. How do you think Mike Ashley plays the short term, Mitch? If we start like we finished last year, 4 wins in 21, does he shrug his shoulders with the I'm going mindset, or does he act on Steve Bruce to protect the value in his asset? Great question, Josh. Mitch, you first.
My personal take on that, he's got form for doing this before. Remember when he went out in the January and splashed some cash and brought Sissoko and others in, and that made the difference to the team. He surely must see that at this moment in time, the asset that is Newcastle United that will release, as it stands with the deal that's on the table, 300 million. That asset needs protecting. He's not going to get that amount of money for the club in the Championship. So it could be a case of if we start off horrendously and we look like we're going to drop like a stone, it does motivate them to act. He's got form for it. You just don't know where his mindset is, because I'm quite sure part of the problem for everything at the minute is he just wasn't expecting to be here.
Yeah.
And nobody was expecting to be here at this point. Which is why, there's certainly plenty of rumbles about what he may or may not be doing in the background as well. And so, yes, I think if he sees there's even a vague chance he's going to lose that asset, he will try and protect it in some way. You don't get to the position that he's in financially by being an idiot all your life.
Yeah. Steve, what's your take on this?
I think it's unquestionable that he would act. He would have to act, as Neil says, to protect his asset. And if he's got any doubts about him, he'd be looking back and he'd be going, when was the last time that this team actually put in a decent performance? When was the last time this manager actually put a team out to put in a decent performance? And I think you could go back to as far as last December, where we got a win just before Christmas. And then after that, it was Leicester, 3-0, New Year's Day. And then we had the terrible performances in the Cup, both third and fourth round, where we were taking the replays by lesser teams, where we managed to scrape a 94th minute goal against Chelsea, who completely turned over for the previous 93 minutes and 50 seconds. And then through from lockdown onwards, the project restart, where we managed to win 2 games out of 8, 2 wins out of 9, 2 in a draw. And I'm looking at the form guide, and I'm thinking, how are you, Bruce? This is like, this has been going on since Christmas. And if he starts off bad, and he shouldn't, by the way, because you look at the fixtures that we've got, and you look at last season against the same teams, and we picked up, I think we picked up something like 12 points out of what would have been the results against the first 6 or 7 fixtures that we've got. So in theory, we should be sitting on 12 points after those 6 games against that opposition. But will we? Because the form guide's telling we're not. And that's scary. That's the scary bit. And that's the asset that he should be protecting. And yes, we've got until October to make transfers and to bring in new signings. But if we start off badly, I think Bruce is under immense pressure. Sorry, Neil?
We've got another problem as well. And
right.
I think it was Josh who made the comment earlier on the screen too, that we're squad size and we're squad management. We sign another 4 players. We've got what then? We've got to get rid of 6.
Yeah.
To get to that squad size. And that just shows the squad management over the last 2 years has been absolutely abysmal. That's why we don't have a decent left back and don't have a striker who can score with 10 to 20 goals.
That's right. And the players who they'll be out of contract next could cause could create a massive problem. But of course,
create a big problem.
This is the problem we have when a takeover is still in the offing, and you've got an owner who doesn't think he'll be there or is hoping he won't be there because that won't be his issue. So, just got to hope that that does resurrect its head and that we end up in a position where we have a takeover and all of these things become a distant memory. David Crone says, "Here's a random question for the lads. If a takeover went through in the near future, do you think Sky would scramble to shoehorn a few of our games into the schedule we have been omitted from?" Great question, David. Neil, it's something which has been a bone of contention, with everybody since the fixtures were announced. None of us can go to any games. Now none of us can watch any games legally because we haven't been chosen. We haven't been chosen for televisation. Yeah. If the takeover went through, and it is a good question, do you think there'd be a sudden change? Do you think there'd be a sudden change of narrative and a sudden change of direction, and suddenly they can fit these games in?
Steve, there could be. Because my experience of dealing with Sky, and Steve will remember this, during our promotion season under Houghton, when we were going into the run-in and they weren't sure which game would be the one that was going to be we're promoted. I think they messed around with our fixtures where fans had booked tickets and time off work and hotels and places like Plymouth and Cardiff, and they were shifting them at like 4 days' notice. And at the time I was chair the fledgling trust, and we wrote to Sky and the Football League, and the only reply we got was off the Football League, and they basically said, Sky do what they want.
Yeah.
Sky do what they want. And I don't see how 9 year on plus 10 year on, that's any different. In fact, if anything, they've probably got a bigger grip on the game. So if they suddenly drop that bait and decide, oh my God, we need to get these guys on telly because of what's happened and because of all the shenanigans that's been happening, of course they will. Because at the end of the day, when we're bouncing, we're box office for Sky.
Yeah. Because
they can get that pundits on, trotting out all the lazy diatribe stereotypes about us and about our expectations and our demands, and they'll be ramped up to the max. They'll have Souness sitting there telling everybody what a horrible place and difficult place it is to go because of the fans and their expectations. They'll probably have little Dennis Wise on with his two penneth about Mike Ashley's exit and all of that. And if you don't have it, I'll have it out here with bloody Keys and Gray.
Rude Hullers.
Aye.
Bellamy.
Although to be fair, when Rude's on over here, he's always quite complimentary. So they'll do it at the drop of a hat because they don't care about us, and in particular, if the grounds are still closed, then that's one less thing for them to worry about.
Yeah,
but they'll not be doing it for our benefit.
No,
it's nothing to do with us.
Would it surprise you, Steve, if that happened though? The takeover goes through and suddenly Newcastle flavour of the month, and they want to be televised now again.
I think they will, but I also think that it'll probably be taken out of their hands, because I wouldn't be surprised if before next weekend they announce that all the games are going to be televised in one shape or form, because even the government's putting them under pressure, because the government doesn't want the aggro. They're sick of Newcastle fans writing letters to them. They don't want letters coming from all the other clubs that are not being televised, because coincidentally, as we've seen, it's the top 5, top 6 that have got all their games on. They're on every game so far. The cartel have struck. They're happy, so it's like they're content. Nothing else happens. In the Premier League, from what we can gather from the reports that came out yesterday at the meeting, it seemed to be the clubs themselves that seemed to be, or was being put out, that it was the clubs themselves who didn't want the games televised, all the games televised, and that broadcasters were keen for it to happen. But it was the clubs themselves, which all I can think of is the clubs didn't want the hassle of having to look at, from a COVID perspective, more TV crews, more reporters, more commentators coming in, the hassle that it creates outside, where the camera crews are all based and all that type of thing. That's all I could imagine it could be, for not showing a live game, because if the broadcasters were keen for it to happen, why would it be the clubs that weren't? And again, maybe it was because there was nothing in it financially for those clubs, because they weren't actually going to be shown on Sky or on, or Sky were going to turn around and go, well, actually, the games that we've already allocated are the ones you get your £1 million for. All the others, yes, you can be on for the fans, but you, as a club, you'll not benefit financially from it. Maybe it's that. Or maybe it's the clubs like Newcastle who've still got members of staff on furlough. Maybe they didn't want the hassle of then having to go into actually putting something out that allowed us to pay £5 or £10 for the stream. Maybe they're not geared up for that yet. I don't know. I mean, I'm just throwing these things out. But it seemed very, very, very strange of a statement. Now, I wouldn't be surprised if next week when they meet, that they do announce that, yeah, if you want to stream it, you can. If you want it, you can.
It seems utterly ridiculous to me, while there's no supporters in the ground. So there's no way that you can say Newcastle's 3 p.m. kickoff is going to affect another club's attendance.
Yes.
That they cannot find a way to get around that. And yet here I am sat 3,500 miles away, and I can take my pick and watch everything. And that's an absolute nonsense. It makes a mockery of the whole setup and about where fans rank to the guys in charge of the game in England. They don't give an absolute flying monkeys about us.
Right.
It's as simple as that.
I think the 3 o'clock sacrosanct timing it's a throwback to the 1960s, when TV, the very first televised game, was shown, and they said, I think there was 2 games were televised in that season, and it was Bob Lord, who was the then chairman of Burnley. I think he was like all these. I think he was a butcher or something, wasn't he? And he was the one with the rest of the Lancashire clubs that stuck out and said, because at the time, in that particular period, there was a lot of clubs together in Lancashire who fans would move between, or potentially could move between, or attendances could be affected if one of those teams were then broadcast on the TV. If it was a Manchester United, or if it was at the time a Blackpool, or a Preston, or a Burnley, or a Blackburn, something like that. They're all very close together. And it was Bob Lord who insisted, with the rest of the hierarchy of the Football League at the time, that we had this, you had to protect the 3 o'clock because you were protecting potentially the other 90 clubs in the league from their attendance. because it was something new. It was TV. It was the opportunity to watch a game in your living room. Those of you that had TVs, and now in the crazy world of digital media, and I don't know about you, but if I had the chance to go to the match, and I would expect that from the vast majority of Newcastle fans, if I had the chance to go and watch Newcastle at 3:00 on a Saturday, and we're all allowed in, but Man United were playing Arsenal at 3:00, that I would stay in the pub to watch Man United v Arsenal. No, I'm still going to watch Newcastle. And I can't think, I don't know another Newcastle fan that would stay in the pub to watch Man United v Arsenal or City v Chelsea. You just wouldn't do it. You go and watch your own team. The armchair fan, if there's such a thing, fair enough. But they're not going to the game anyway. Yeah.
I can give you an example though. We played Hull, and I was down there with Jamie Fender and a few of the other lads. And me and Jamie were standing watching the game, and the game before the Hull game on the telly was Man U Liverpool, and there was a couple there, husband and wife, and I think he had a Man U shirt on, she had a Liverpool shirt on, and they were holding hands watching the game. All right, well, we've seen some things in my time. Here's another example. That game finished. They went into her bag. They got 2 Hull shirts out and put them on over the top of the Man U and the Liverpool shirts. We asked Jimmy, true story. And we were like, what? And off they go to watch the whole game. So maybe there is a fan base out there who would prefer to sit and watch Man U Liverpool at 3:00 and go and watch their own team. But certainly us, and you couldn't see even the Mackhams doing something like that, could you? It's just
absolutely mental. Absolutely mental. No. I can't believe that. Yeah, it is bizarre. We've got 30 minutes left, guys, because as I said, I'm going to have to watch Dunstan play Morpeth. So last half hour, please keep your questions coming in, and please hit the like button. It doesn't take you 2 seconds to do it. Just hit the thumbs up. Over 107 people have done so already, with nearly 500 people watching again. We're always thankful for that, honestly, guys. It means a lot that people, we know you've got a lot of choice, but the fact that you take up a little bit of your time on a Friday night to watch us does mean a lot. So thanks very much. Let's talk about the cartel meeting that took place this week, and they were defeated, Steve. Substitutions. The cartel wanted 5 substitutes next season to make it a bit easier, so that they could get all their flash new signings on. But it's got defeated. 3 substitutes. We're staying as it is. Good news.
Yeah, absolutely good news. I think 11-9 apparently was the vote, so it was pretty close. It wasn't done on anything other than a majority vote. Second time round, of course, because of that, there's obviously been a bit of lobbying gone on, but 9 clubs wanted it and 11 didn't. You know what? I would turn it on its head. I find the squad. Obviously, you've got a squad. I would be quite happy if you were allowed to have 30 in your squad or 35 in your squad because you've bought those players. I'd be quite happy that you could choose, but you could still only choose the number on the bench. The 7, whatever it is now on the bench, of which you played 3 substitutes. But I find the size of the squad where you have to whittle it down to 25 rather odd. And if I was going to suggest a change, it would, especially for this season, especially with COVID and especially when we're starting again so quickly after the last, and we're talking about injuries and such. Like, I would have erred on that side. That would be something I would have been lobbying for if I was part of the club, rather than actually using 5 substitutes in a game. Because I think if you're buying players and you need a squad, we've got players that are, as you said, we're going to be at least 6 over. And you're never going to, you can't get rid of them because no one would buy them unless you're going to give them and cancel their contracts. So they're just going to sit, picking up the money, taking the wage. I would rather those players were used in some way, shape, or form, or available to be used in some way, shape, or form. And slot in and use them, and possibly even have a go back to having a proper under-23s or what we used to call the reserve team, where they played fixtures, you know, because it seems mental. You know, I mean, we had the ginger Perlo who was out for an entire season. You know, it was picking up 40, 50 grand a week. You know, and was pointless. Save. I mean, Save's had 2 appearances since 2017. You know, crazy, absolutely crazy that you're lumbered with that. Surely you could use him if he was available, and you know, injuries or, you know, squad rotation or something like that. Especially when you lose the likes of Paul Dummett and he's out for the whole season and you cannot replace him in your squad. You know, you have to find a youngster that you haven't got to play in that position. So you then have to swap over and balance and that type of thing, you know. But getting back to the point, yeah, absolutely great that the cartel lost out. And I wouldn't be surprised if it came back, mind. I think with all of these things, you wouldn't be surprised if they had another shot at it between now and the start of the season.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised at all. Just a couple of points before I ask you about that, Mitch, and that's yes. Who asked the question? Does it cost to subscribe to the channel? No, it's free. We are going to be introducing something in the next week or so on the channel where you can donate something towards it. As things are getting, on, we might be able to improve the show and improve the channel. So yeah, we might introduce that, but it'll always remain free. It won't cost anybody anything to watch. I know there is adverts when you don't watch live. That's unfortunate. That's how we generate a little bit of cash, but it does all help during the period of lockdown. And as I say, we might be able to make it bigger and better. Who knows? We might be able to fly over to see Neil, because I don't think Neil will want to fly over here and suffer this weather in the winter. But me and Steve could jump on a plane and go and do one live together.
We'll get Stu Perman over from Bahrain again, and we can have another week of the George Best tribute act that we'll just be doing.
Exactly. That sounds fantastic, by the way. But yeah, it doesn't cost anything.
Book in for me dialysis next week.
Truls Hagen Christiansen, that's who asked. No, it doesn't cost you anything to sub. A couple of people saying we should do the show twice a week. It's something we could look at. Certainly, we've really enjoyed it. And Dan Hunt has finally realised my beard's gone. Yeah, I had a shave the other night, which went down a storm, it has to be said, with Gibbo and Super Mac, and most of the questions that night were about me beard, why I grew it, what was I doing. So yeah, fantastic that my facial hairs actually created such a stir. But Mitch, yeah, the 3 substitutes, I'm pleased with that, because I agree. There's a few people saying it would have essentially slowed the game down, and there was no need for it. It was a temporary suggestion, during the COVID break. But I'm happy with 3. Are you?
The one thing that reassures me with this vote is that there remains some sort of checks and balances still somewhere in there within the Premier League. It's really very, very, very frustrating, because this cartel feel is grown, and I get why that feeling has grown over the last few months in particular. Yeah, it slowed the game down. I still believe the water breaks halfway through the half was an experiment to see how we would react to the game going to quarters. I think they've found ways to try things that somebody in the football hierarchy somewhere could see as an advertising opportunity. For example, here's your first quarter break sponsored by Tagoya or whatever, I see these things in American sport. I mean, people may know footballers on Twitter. I follow American football quite closely, and a lot of the things that they introduce, everything is sponsored. The video refereeing is sponsored. The coin toss at the start of the game is sponsored. Everything is sponsored. And in terms of commercialism, our game is starting to catch that up, and in other ways exceed it, particularly in terms of TV rights. Because it's a more global game. And so I'm pleased to see that the Premier League clubs can actually put some sort of brakes on things that the big clubs, when they stamp their feet and say, we want to go and vote again, they're told, no, the vote stands and it's a majority vote, end of. And that's the way it should be.
Yeah, no, I would agree. Yeah, I would agree with that as well. A lot of people asking tonight as well about the whole, the transfer saga and this left back we've brought in. Again, we mentioned it earlier on the program. None of us know anything about him. He could be good. He could be absolutely useless. Somebody suggesting that because Steve Nixon scouted him, that it could be the left back equivalent of Joe Linton. Let's hope not.
Perhaps you can score goals.
Maybe he can. Maybe he can.
By a striker that can't, and a left back that can. That would be, wonderfully ironic.
Every other, let's face it, every other player that that comes in the back four has managed to score goals under Steve Bruce. So that could be the way forward. Spudsy asks us a completely different question. I like it when we go down these routes. If you three guys could bring anyone back now to Newcastle in their prime, who would it be? Mine would be Gaza, he says. Mine, quite obviously, would be Alan Shearer, because we need a goal scorer. Steve?
Off the top of my head, Peter Beardsley.
Peter Beardsley. Mitch, what about you?
Well, like you, if we were to bring him back for this current team, you'd need Shearer. You'd need someone who could score goals on his own, create goals for other people, and be a proper number 9. If it was drop any player from the past in their prime into a better team than what we've got at the minute, I still have a big soft spot for a French maverick, and it would have to be Ginola.
All right, okay. Yeah, good shout. I hope that answers your question. Howard Roberts says, one for Steve. Do you know if there are any ex-player golf days? Yeah, they are. There's some really big ones. Alan Shearer does an annual event for the Alan Shearer Foundation, which is always very good, but a tad expensive for people in normal football supporters. There are loads that over the years. I've played in a couple. I've seen a couple. I've promote a couple. Glenn McCrory's done a few over the years. But there is so many. I think there's probably, certainly you're talking 3 figures each year. Different people, different charities who do them. I think there even used to be a Newcastle Sunderland Old Boys one. I'm not sure if that's still ongoing with the likes of Bob Moncurn, Pop Robson playing. I think that's organised through the club. Steve Hastie and nodding. I think I am right.
Yeah, I know the Sir Bobby Robson Foundation used to do one. They used to have a golf day, and I think there was also a one that was done in the name of Sir Bobby that was over in Portugal, wasn't there? I think there used to be a tournament that took place. I can't recall it happening this year, obviously because of COVID. But I'm aware that there was a lot of the sort of ex-managers that used to turn up, the likes of Allardyce, people like that, and that would throw their hat into the ring and go and play golf. It was probably Alan Brazil and people like that you'd have to drink with, which means that a little bit more competition for Mitch and Stewie if they're going to go out on a drinking session. But I think even those two could probably drink Alan Brazil under the table, given what we've seen this week.
Jesus.
What? Just out of interest, Mitch, what prompted this? It's actually causing more debate on Twitter than it is on anything else. I've seen more articles on that than I've seen on this new left back.
I was speaking to Stu and his lovely wife Maria yesterday about it. It's like, how much interest can there be on 2 mates on the lash on Twitter? I mean, that's pretty much all it was. He moved to Bahrain about 18 months ago, and it's his first time back in Dubai.
Right, okay.
His first opportunity when they opened the flights between Bahrain and Dubai, and the movement was a bit easier. He took the opportunity to come back and see everybody, and so we've had a proper catch up in a real good few days, and some real good laughs. And what you need during such rubbish times is you get your mates together, and I've caught up with people I've not seen in ages. It's a shame that a couple of lads who were here are now out of the country and they couldn't have joined as well, because it would have been even better. It's been good to catch up.
I mean, to be honest, I did that this weekend. I had a catch up with people who I hadn't seen for a long time. But the bad idea was to go out and then come back for an hour and do a podcast with Super Mac and Gibbo. So, to be honest, I felt like I was getting my own back on Gibbo. To be honest, because he's done that to me a few times at live events. But I handled it quite well. Although me wife and family thought I was absolutely mental doing that. But I thought, well, why not? If it's acceptable for Neil Mitchell, it's acceptable for me.
I remember doing a live event with Gibbo and Steve. Was it the one in Gosforth, Steve, where he went on a little bit of a rant and he used a particularly non-PC phrase out of the blue? Yeah. For about 10 minutes, you could hear a pin drop.
There was another one over. I think it was just past Palmersville, wasn't it? Just as we moved through.
Yeah.
Where was that? Where Boundary Mills is, down that way on. And we went to one down there, and again he was on absolute tip-top form. But it was the flow of white wine, wasn't it, that him lubricated. But he was great. I mean, all those ones that we did with Gibbo, all those road shows where Gibbo turned up, John Anderson, quite a few ex-players who give that time for free to help promote NUFC, the Supporters Club, which obviously came about following 12 years ago this week. Keegan got the push, and we all started to really sort of stamp our feet and the call to arms that came from that particular weekend, and you look back and you think, dear me, I went any further forward 12 years later. But yeah, there were great times. But from Berwick and Bamborough right the way down to Bishop Auckland, I think we travelled, over a period of months, sometimes 2 and 3 times a week. The lads put the graft in and put the hard yards in. And be perfectly honest, we heard the same thing right across everywhere we went, and we heard the same enthusiasm for the black and white stripes that we're still here today. We didn't hear the same enthusiasm for the owner, naturally, or we did with the same non-enthusiasm for the owner. The attitudes were still there among the fan base as we are now, but we still supported the club, and we still supported the team, and we still supported the black and white stripes. I worry sometimes that we're now in a situation where fans are leaving in droves. And okay, that they're going to follow non-league, or they're going to do other things, and I worry that once this is all over, whether those fans will be coming back, or we're going to lose another generation. But more importantly, are we going to gain a generation? I think that's the hard bit. You can lose a generation, and normally you would gain a generation at the bottom end. People handing their tickets over to their sons or their grandkids and that type of thing. I worry that the people that we're losing now won't be replaced, especially if the current regime stays in place. And that's why, if anything, I've still got my heart set on a takeover in some way, shape, or form for the football club, just for the life of the football club, just for the lifeblood of the supporters, and to give us that spur. And listening to you two guys, I hope you're right. I really do, because I worry that if it doesn't happen, where the club long term is heading, and where the supporter base is heading, a deteriorating, a getting older, and a loss-making fan base. I think it's quite sad.
Yeah, that's the big concern, and the fact that we had to give 10,000 season tickets away last season, Mitch, is something which never really, it never really gets mentioned. That whenever there's this comment by the media, I've seen it on various networks over the last 12 months. At 52,000, it's a sellout. It's not. There's 10,000 tickets given away, wasn't it, last season?
It did fly under the radar a little bit. For one reason or another. And Steve's right to say that worry about a generational loss. Again, picking up from going around talking to people during those roadshows, I'll never forget going to all sorts of different places and hearing the same thing from a certain generation of fans. And they were the ones who left after Gordon Lee and Superman.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And there was, I don't know whether Malcolm is ever touched on this when he spoke to you about it, because obviously he was away from the club. But there was certainly a generation, and it was usually the similar four guys sat on a table at the front of one of the road shows, and they had plenty to say and plenty to talk about, and they loved Newcastle United, but they'd never set foot in St James's Park again since Super Mackleth. And there was definitely a generational hiatus then. And we're going to get the same again. But this time, I think, for the club, it could be much more devastating.
Yeah, I agree, Steve. John's missing the Bodega more. I think, Steve, that's the big concern, isn't it? That, you know, like you just mentioned, it's losing that particular generation, and you know, we're going through that phase again of you could walk through a park where kids are playing football, and there's more Man City, Liverpool, and Man United tops than there is Newcastle tops now. Whereas back in the 90s under Keegan, we had that renaissance where we were everyone's favourite second team, and kids were wearing the top. They were proud to wear it, the Newcastle top.
Yeah, absolutely. And you go back. I mean, I know that we've as supporters, we've been treated badly over the years. I mean, you go back to. I mean, I talked about Freddie Fletcher last week, and I talked about the Save Our Seats campaign, and you know, my brother was one of the guys who, you know, and his crowd that moved. They had their seats were moved, and they never felt as though they were part of the club after they'd moved seats, because they were scattered to the four winds, and the only time they got together was either pre or post match. They weren't together during the game because they weren't allocated seats together anymore, and it was part of that camaraderie that they had. And you know, they still talk about it now. I mean, brother Jed still talks about it. You know, he still talks about the times that they had with Stevie and the rest of the lads that they went to the game with. You know, and how they miss it. They all miss it. Whether he's, you know, he looks back now and he thinks, I wonder whether any of the lads would come back, and they probably would all come back for the drink, because the post-match and pre-match camaraderie would always be there. It's whether they can stomach what's inside the ground, whether they can stomach the performances, whether they want to be part of it again. You know, I mean, one of the lads, Greg, he comes up with his son. And they travel up from London and come to, you know, try to come to 3 or 4 games a season, and the little lad loves it. I'm sure Greg loves it as well, but I think the little lad loves it more. But that's only 3 or 4 times a season when they can manage to get tickets. They actually go to more away games and pick up tickets, whether they get them either in among the Newcastle fans or in among the home fans, you know, for the London games. But there's still the excitement there. There's still the buzz. But it's whether it transfers to match day and the changes that people have made to their life, the changes that they've made in that social circle. Because I love going to match and I love after the match with all my pals that we've gone, you know, since, well, we were together since like 1974, 73 on the terraces, you know, and the Gallagher end. And I love the crack, and I love after the game chatting about it, the game, and then the staying out until 9:30, 10, 11, whatever, you know, still sitting in the strawberry at 11:30 and Caroline trying to throw out the door because we're in a drunken stupor, you know. And I the thing that's bothering us is like, will some of the lads be joining with this season? The lads who have already said they've wrapped their tickets in, will they come back? You know, will they just turn up after the game? What will they miss? I just find it so depressing at times when I think about it. I try not to think about it, and that's why I'm hoping that, like I said earlier, I'm hoping that the confidence that you two guys have got in the takeover does come about at some point in time, and that we can get something back. I don't necessarily think we need to get back that we're going to be sitting top of the league or anything like that. I just want what that match day experience was like and want it to return. And I want that buzz and that excitement. And I want my nephews to understand why we got excited when we did at their age and then beyond. Why we were excited during the entertainers. Why we were excited going to Wembley. the fact that we went to Wembley, twice on the trot, or 3 times if you count the semi-final, then going back in 2005, the fact that we had a football club that actually wanted to, or had the ability to get to FA Cup finals, the fact that we could go abroad to watch Newcastle United play, whether it was in Barcelona or Marseille, or whether it was in Germany, I've actually, over the last few years, I've seen more German football live than I have Newcastle in terms of away games, because I've had the opportunity, because I haven't had the opportunity to see Newcastle in Europe for so long now, and I still, we've gone as a group to Germany, we've gone to Leverkusen, we've gone to Schalke and places like that, and made a weekend of it, and thoroughly enjoyed the whole atmosphere, the whole from the Friday to the Monday when you come back. But I want my pals, I want Sonny, I want Sonny to be appreciating and have his own season ticket and be able to take when he gets older, because he's a good little footballer. But I want him to have the opportunity to go and enjoy watching some of the class defenders that by watching them he could benefit from, and have that enthusiasm, and maybe want to put the Newcastle shirt on at some point in time, rather than, well, I'm not interested. That's what new ownership could bring. I'm hoping that it could bring to Newcastle United again, and to the region and to the city. Regardless of everybody talking about investment in the region, the investment is in the people. The investment is in our hearts. Get what we've got in our hearts back out there into the community, into the football club, and get what to taste proper football again, and the excitement of a match day. That's what it's about. That's what Newcastle's about.
Yeah, and Mitch, I would agree. I mean, Steve's nailed it there, hasn't he? Really, that is
Absolutely.
What Newcastle United is all about.
Spot on. I see names flip up in here. John Melrose is one. Lads I've been all over the country with, and we've all got tales in that camaraderie. You can here, you can there with your mates, and however many times we say that was a great weekend, spoiled by 90 minutes of football. I've seen somebody talking about going from Portugal to Cardiff in 4 days. Yep, we did that. And you talk to younger fans. Trying to explain to my daughter, who's 9 now. She was watching something on YouTube about the Barcelona game. When did we play Barcelona? It's like, okay, history lesson time. And it would be nice to pass that baton on, to let our Joss go and do some of the things I did at his age. And as he moves in, well, maybe he's not. Maybe he's not. But that's another matter. Tracy's mother would kill him. But yeah, it's that feeling that you cannot pass. Is the baton going to be passed?
Yeah.
He goes with his mates and he loves it, and it's great. But you kind of do wonder, is that going to dwindle if something doesn't happen soon? And are we going to lose that generation?
Yeah.
And it's frustrating.
Yeah, it is. And as we say, I know there's been equal amount of people on the channel tonight saying, I saw one quote: anyone who thinks that the takeover is going to go ahead's on mushrooms. Yeah. Look, yeah, we're all entitled to opinions. Some of us have got a little bit more information coming in than others, and let's just hope. Look, we've still got hope. We have got hope of a takeover still going through. And if it doesn't happen, we're stuck with Ashley. The club will always be there. And I think Steve's made quite a passionate speech, which a lot of you have appreciated again tonight. And, that's the one thing that Mike Ashley can never take away, what we feel about the city, what we feel about the club. And, from our perspective, we're all living in hope that the takeover can go through and we can see some great days again at St. James's Park. So fingers crossed. A lot of people again saying great show, lads. Very kind of you. Thanks, Paul. He says great show, lads. How are the lads? Mark, another cracking show tonight. Cheers, lads. It's very nice. We do enjoy doing it. Obviously, the games are coming up again in the next couple of weeks as well. So I'm sure we'll be doing the pre-match and the after-match as well. As long as we can, we'll do it. We do enjoy doing this. We're just saying off air before that it's the one show that that I enjoy doing. So, if we ever get back to some kind of normality, I'm sure that I won't be able to do 7 a night, but this is the one I would love to keep on because I do thoroughly enjoy doing it. And yeah, the clock has beaten us again. Tomorrow I have got Peter Hooton on. It's a pre-record. I did it about 10 days ago. And yeah, great interview with Peter Hooton. Nice to get somebody from the Spirit of Shankly on. Obviously, we'll talk a little bit about his career. It's 30 years. I interviewed him 30 years to the day that I interviewed him for a fanzine. I went to Liverpool when I did the Mighty Quinn, and I interviewed him in a bar in Liverpool. And it was actually 30 years to the day since I'd first interviewed him. So it's great, well worth a watch. And that's tomorrow. That's tomorrow, 5 o'clock. A lot of people asking about Lee Clark. Lee's had a couple of issues, nothing major as far as he's concerned, but a couple of issues which I can't really go into. That's why he hasn't been able to come back on. A lot of people asking about Lee. I will pass on all the comments. He will be coming back on, guys. Just a couple of things going on which I can't really discuss, but yeah, he's he will be back on the show at some point. A lot of people asking about Michael Chopra. Maybe he's just dropped him a tweet. Michael, of course, won't come on until things are resolved either way, but I think it seems to have been resolved anyway by Mike Ashley. But we'll see what happens. Lads, as always, have a good week.
Yeah, and I tell you what, Steve, only show so far that I've come across, right across all the social media and TV, that said that Lionel Messi would stay at Barcelona. Got 3 out of 3 last week, didn't we? And I think that's what it's been proved. So I think we've, if anything, we've got one thing right. The 3 of us have got one thing right over the last 7 days, which is more than Newcastle managed anyway.
Yeah. I'm pretty sure Neil Warnock said it as well, because he's the go-to man for information on Newcastle United, isn't he? So great stuff, lads. As always, have a good week, and I'll see you again next Friday.
Take care.
Cheers, lads.
Take care, lads. Bye-bye.